Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are at this moment, dedicated on an insight how to become a Master Instructional Designer. My name is Nina Senova, and I'm a senior conference producer here at Informa. And it is my pleasure to welcome you today and introduce you to Kimberly Devlin, who is the facilitator from ATD, who will be giving you this webinar today. Before we start, I would like to tell everyone that this webinar is recorded and all presentation slides and the recording will be shared straight after the webinar. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Kimberly, who will give you some more information about herself. And at any given time, you can ask your questions at the question box, and we can answer them after the presentation is finished. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you for that. So before I tell you who I am, I wanted to tell you that recently I was working with a group of people who are instructional designers. Some worked in the public sector and some worked in the private sector. And I asked them, what are your greatest challenges in your work? And they quickly had a list of things. And I think that they might be similar to the things that you face. And they were things along the lines of collaborating with other people and getting material and input from them, finding a way to get buy-in from stakeholders, having credibility as instructional designers, the time and money issue of trying to meet deadlines and do things on tight budgets, and most importantly, finding ways to get results from the trainings that they're putting together, both transfer of learning as well as from the multiple levels of evaluation perspective. And when I asked them to share their challenges, I also asked them to tell me the types of things that they're doing to work around those issues. And many of them had similar strategies, and they were good strategies. They just didn't rise high enough to get through the challenges that they were facing. And so we ended up spending a few days together working through that, and to great result for them. And I share that before I even tell you anything about who I am, because who I am doesn't matter too much until you know that the work that we do with ATD education really generates results for the people that we work with. And so by slight way of introduction, my name is Kimberly Devlin, and I came into this field of instructional design as a subject matter expert. I had expertise in an area, and it translated well into instructional design. And boy, did I make mistakes in the beginning. And so I feel the pain of those that went through the transition of being a subject matter expert with expertise in some area and being pretty good at communication and instruction and documentation and being shuffled into a direction of becoming an instructional designer. I know the learning curve of that. I know the bumps of that. And in the course of my work, I've worked both with the public sector and the private sector. I've worked with instructional designers and facilitators. I do instructional design and I facilitate, and I truly enjoy the process. So I'd like to share a bit with you about where we're headed today. I suspect that many of you joined the call because you have two questions on your mind. If you're thinking about the value of becoming a master instructional designer, I assume that one of the questions you have is this a good investment of my time? Because time is a precious commodity. And I suspect that the other question is this a good investment of my resources, my financial resources and dollars? But those two questions translate not just to should I become an a master instructional designer, but how do I deal with the time constraints and the budget constraints on my projects? So you're probably looking both for some tips and strategies on how to do your job better currently, as well as some ideas as to whether or not the Master Instructional Designer is the right path for you. So I'd like to share answers to both of those things in our time. Here are some comments from participants that I've worked with recently in the Master Instructional Design program. I'll give you a moment to look through those. I particularly appreciated Kieran's comment, gentleman from India, down in the lower left corner, that said that I've changed the way he looks at instructional design. And that to me was so powerful because many people, particularly those of us that have come in as subject matter experts from another field, we often start the design process 3 steps down the road. And what I mean by that is we jump to creating learner materials. We jump to building slide decks and handouts and job aids and exercises. And to be a master instructional designer, one of the key questions that I think you came here looking for, to be a master instructional designer means taking a very big step back and assessing what the need actually is, starting with what the business drivers are, beginning from a place where you ask, what do we want to achieve? What do we want to have happen? What do we want to see working differently in the workplace after this learning event? And it's only when you ask those types of questions that you can really get to the heart of what the issues are, and then craft and structure a design that appropriately meets those needs. So these are some comments from participants in the program. I also want to share with you some of the overarching benefits of the program, that is. So you can see them on screen. The materials that support the program really focus in on getting you to a place where you're achieving learning transfer for your participants. So what does that mean? When you design your courses, it's not, our end goal is not creating a PowerPoint or other slide deck. It's not turning over a beautiful facilitator guide for someone to follow. It's not about creating the perfect storyboard and accompanying e-learning program. Our goal as instructional designers is for the participants in our programs to go back to work and do their job differently. And that's what learning transfer is, transferring the new skills, transferring that knowledge that accompanies it into the work environment. The other nice point here is being an industry recognized designation, Master Instructional Designer. And that's an important point. For many people, having that designation will create credibility for you and create an opportunity to get greater buy-in. I know when I pursued the CPLP, the Certified Professional in Learning and Performance, it had a similar effect for me. When we look at the third point on feedback, part of the process, which I will detail for you, is to submit a work product. And I would be reviewing that for you and giving you specific feedback on it. And there are a huge number of takeaways, tools that you can start using right away, templates to help you streamline the process, resources in addition to what we cover in the course. And this last point about being held accountable for your learning really truly is a benefit. Participants in programs want to be held accountable. They want to value the learning. They want the learning to be valued for them. So by creating that accountability for you, it enhances your experience. Trying to get my slide to advance there for you so that you can all see it. There seems to be a delay. I will tell you while I'm trying to get it to advance, oh, there it goes, that the program, the Master Instructional Design program, is based on an aspect of ATD's competency model. ATD made a big investment in research to develop this competency model. And if you look at the graphic on screen, you'll see so very many different aspects of the training and development profession. The one that we hit on most specifically in this course is the area of instructional design. And that means we're going to talk about, not only talk about, but work through content associated to such key knowledge areas as business strategy and needs assessment approaches, content knowledge or techniques to get content from your subject matter experts, learning theory, instructional design theory. But it's not all about theory. We're going to be working with instructional design processes and practices and share different instructional methods to create the learning experiences that you're looking for. Assessment is going to be a big part of that, both from a measurement perspective as well as assessing needs. And some of the actions that you can expect us to be focused on are some of the things that come from the competency model that designate a successful instructional designer. The ability to conduct a thorough and complete needs assessment and do it efficiently, do it fairly quickly, because we're all on those time constraints. We don't have the luxury of weeks and weeks, most typically, to create our programs. Applying learning theory. It's not enough to know learning theory. We need to be able to translate that into actual practice. How do we take lecture-based, content-heavy programs and convert them into interactive learning experiences where people get to have an exploratory learning event that taps into what they already know and takes them to new heights? How do we go about collaborating with others? How do we design a curriculum or a learning solution that is efficient and instructionally sound? And then how do we develop the materials that support that? So it's a very robust program. If you look online at td.org and take a closer look at the competency model, you'll see the key actions and the key knowledge areas associated with instructional design listed there, which in and of itself can be a valued learning opportunity. So what does good instructional design look like? What it looks like is an event that causes learners to challenge what they already know, take away new skills, take away new knowledge, and go back and actually use it. It's not about learning for the sake of learning. It's about improving workplace performance, which is how we know that it's valuable, when we see people applying what they learn. So who should consider becoming a Master Instructional Designer? I'm so pleased to see such a very large number of you here this morning or afternoon or evening, depending. And I get this question frequently, is the program the right program for me? So it's geared towards an experienced instructional designer. If you're brand new at instructional design, there are other courses that might be more aligned, like the designing learning. But if you have a few years of experience with instructional design under your belt, so to speak, you fall right into the sweet spot of participants in this program. And it does not matter if you are an external consultant or an internal employee. It's perfectly well suited for both. And if you happen to be one of those subject matter experts, and you're not even technically a trainer or an instructional designer, but you're asked to create those courses for someone else to lead or put materials together for participants, certainly an ideal program for you. And whichever industry you may be in, it does not matter. As I mentioned, I've worked with the public sector extensively and the private sector extensively, and there are differences between the two, and there are also many commonalities. And that's always an interesting experience when we have a mixed group, which is commonly the case. And then this last point is really quite critical. If you're looking for professional recognition, if you're looking for a designation, and you want to be able to tell people sort of with pride, I would hope, that you have gone through this process, you've gone through this learning experience, and you've demonstrated your skills, Master Instructional Designer could be a very good place for you to get started. And so my question to you is if this sounds like something that you might want to do. So let me share a bit more with you about it. Why ATD? What would be the compelling reasons that you might want to consider advancing your development, your professional skills with ATD? And so there are three aspects that I'll talk to you about. One is the structure of the program, which is really, I think, the most important, and it's the reason it's the first item there, because the robust nature of the curriculum and the process is really what makes it so valued for you. and clearly ATD's expertise and reputation in the field, specifically ATD education, which is a sort of subset, if you will, of the ATD organization. And then I'll share with you a bit about who I am toward the end, so that if you care to research me and find out exactly who you'd be learning with, you have a solid understanding, because I recognize that that's an incredibly important part of the equation for many, many people. And as we go through these three areas, I'm going to sprinkle in some of the content that I share in the program so that this time can be a learning experience for you as well. So let me begin by sharing with you the structure of the Master Instructional Design program. There are three distinct aspects to it, and it begins with this fundamentals section component. There is pre-work to do for the course, and it includes tapping into a very large body of content that are best practices for the field. Some people use it as baseline material to refresh themselves on things that they encountered along the way, but have sort of let slip from the forefront of their mind. Others use it to fill in gaps. Maybe there is content that they felt confident in, but they couldn't really articulate exactly why, and the body of knowledge will help fill in those gaps. And for other people, it brings them up to the base level, and it doesn't matter which of those three categories you fall into. But one aspect of that fundamentals is that you'll be asked to complete an online assessment. It's 20 questions, and it's based on the material of that body of knowledge, and you have multiple opportunities to score appropriately on that. Passing that assessment is one of the requirements to achieve the Master Instructional Designer designation. After the fundamentals component, also with the fundamentals, I forgot to mention, ATD has this fabulous portal that enables the group to start connecting a few weeks prior to coming together in Amsterdam to work together. And so we'll be having discussions and opportunities to introduce ourselves and get to know one another through a portal prior to coming together. And then there is the core course, our 3-day learning experience. Highly interactive, highly collaborative. If you sat in the corner of the room and just watched the process, you would learn a tremendous amount about instructional design. So it's not a lecture-based course. For example, one of the first content pieces we look at are different instructional design models and approaches. Rather than lecturing on those, we have interactive puzzles and teachbacks and manipulative-based exercises that have people up and out of their seats working with the content, sharing their experiences and stories, and then supplementing that with what hasn't been brought to the forefront by the group, as one example. And those are strategies that I would hope you'll be using in your instructional designs. So as you participate in the content, you're also experiencing techniques to enhance your own deliveries. And this course asks you to submit a project. There is a rubric that I would be assessing projects against. And what this does is it gives you an opportunity to apply everything that we work through in the course. It gives you an opportunity to receive feedback on that real world project. And it gives you an opportunity to demonstrate your skill set. And then also wonderfully, you have an additional learning opportunity. In addition to the 3 days together and the project and the fundamentals, you can choose another ATD program to complete as an elective, and it's included in the overall Master Instructional Design program. So just a little bit here about, actually quite a bit here about ATD education. I'll let you read through the components of this that you gravitate to, but I do want to point out down there in the lower right-hand corner, over 42 different certificate programs. And although the graphic focuses in on the United States, obviously ATD is also working internationally as well. And Master Instructional Design in Amsterdam, to my understanding, will be the first time that program is being offered in Europe. And so it's a unique opportunity for 16 people. It's a limited course size. 16 people is the maximum enrollment. And on our final slide, I'm going to share some really good news for all of you about discounts because you've made the investment of time to join us on the webinar. You see sort of towards the middle on the left-hand side, it talks about 4 Master Series programs. And Master Instructional Designer is one of those 4. And ATD Education puts a great deal of emphasis on making sure that those master programs are top of the line, current, applicable, hands-on, best practices, modeling exactly what we would want to be seeing. So let me show you what the structure of the course looks like. I told you briefly that there are those 3 parts, the fundamentals, the core course, and then the project and elective. These 3 days in October will be happening in Amsterdam. So it's the 10th, 11th, and 12th. That's during the European Summit. The pre-work would be happening up to 3 weeks prior to that. And the part 3 work, project and elective, has 2 timelines. You have 8 weeks after October 12th to finish your project, which is more than enough time because we will give you what you need to know during the 3 days to complete that project successfully. Make it as straightforward for you. I don't want to say as easy for you because it isn't necessarily easy, but I don't want to make it overly difficult for you. I want you to leave the program with great clarity over what that looks like and what we are expecting of you. And so let's take a deeper dive into each of these areas. I mentioned the portal opening up a few weeks before the core course. You'll connect with each other there. I'll pose some questions to you there to get you started thinking. On the portal, you will find that core content that I mentioned earlier, that the assessment questions, the knowledge check or knowledge assessment will be based upon. And before you come to the program, I'll invite you to think about what project you might want to submit. I'll also tell you that sometimes during the program, people decide to change their project, which is perfectly fine, perfectly fine. The knowledge assessment itself, sometimes that makes people a little antsy, a little nervous, and I don't want it to. So the 20 questions are based on the material that's on the portal. And very often I find people tell me that they choose to take the assessment before reading through any of the material and are surprised at how challenging the questions are. And then they realize that they're able to take the assessment as many times as may be necessary. And they also realize that it's not a bad idea to work through that core foundational material before completing the assessment questions. The nice thing about it is online and you get your results immediately. So you know right away if you have a little more work to do. And it's fine for you to take it before you come to the program. You could choose to focus on it during the program, although your days will be quite full. So I suggest that either before or after the core program makes more sense. And then when we talk about the core course, the 3 days together, I've listed on screen here the different modules. Earlier in our broadcast, I mentioned that many people who come into the field as subject matter experts start in the middle. They start by developing their learning solution. You can see here that that's pretty far down the path and that the analysis is really going to be quite critical. Asking questions like, what does success look like? Asking questions like, if I came to the workplace after this program, what would I see happening differently? And the reason that questions like that are so important is because too often our customers will tell us things like, when we say, what does success look like? They will say, oh, you know, everybody will know the new policy. They will have learned it. And we know that that's not a sufficient response. And so we probe and we ask a follow-up question. And we say, okay, so how will we know that they learned it? And they'll say something like, oh, you know, well, they'll be following the policy. And that still is not sufficient for us. And so we want to push further and say, what will it look like? What will be happening differently? And sometimes it takes a second or a third question to get to the place where our customer is describing the behaviors they want to have consistently demonstrated in the workplace. And it's not until we get to that point in the analysis that we really even know what we're instructing on. Because if it's just about pushing content and telling people the policy, that's when people come back and say, why didn't you send me your slides? I could have just read this and it would have been just as good. This is the time where I would love to be able to see you raise your hands and tell me if that in fact is the world that you live in, because so often is. And then of course, once we understand the needs, we want to design an appropriate solution. We want to build the architectural structure of the course before we start developing it, building the actual components of the course. And although Module 4 seems like the last thing we are covering in this course, evaluation, we don't leave it until Module 4. We do not leave it until the end. We start talking about evaluation on day 1, which is when I hope you will start talking about evaluation on your projects, because it's not appropriate to analyze a need, design a course, develop the materials, roll it out or begin to roll it out or get ready to roll it out, and then say, I really think we should measure the effectiveness of this. How are we going to do that? We should be asking that question all the way up front and building an evaluation plan all the way up front. And so we will model that in Amsterdam, and that is how we will approach it. So in your materials, the content will reside in Module 4, but we are going to experience that throughout. And as you can see from the welcome and introductions and the program summary, we put some very solid bookends to this course, setting the stage with you at the beginning and ensuring your next steps, ensuring your transfer of learning from our core course time to your work practices. Again, modeling those best practices. So here's a little bit of a deeper dive into what content and skills will be covered in the core course. On the left-hand side, you can read through the skills that we'll be focusing on. That ID models, an abbreviation for instructional design models. I've talked a lot about the second bullet point, so I'll move to the third. Gaining acceptance for your plan. Very often in my experience, instructional designers are up against a roadblock of customers, internal or external, who disagree with their thought process. And so we're going to share strategies for framing your results, techniques for encouraging your clients to see the value, see the thought process behind your design, and therefore gain that buy-in. And because writing learning objectives is so foundational, we certainly are going to make sure that all of you that come to the program are doing that not just well, but with confidence and with understanding why it is now being well done and what some of the common stumbling blocks are. So if you're putting the word "and" in your learning objectives, we have some opportunity to help you there. And if you're starting with verbs like learn, know, or understand, which many of us have done, we are going to change that for you and give you much better alternatives aligned with a tool that you may be familiar with or not. Bloom's taxonomy of learning, Benjamin Bloom. Very powerful tool. You can Google it, you can hop online and do an internet search to find it, and that'll be a great aid to you after this call. And then come to Amsterdam with us and we'll take a nice deep dive into how to use that tool and how to align it with your projects. We talked about learning transfer as well and planning for that job transfer, but down toward the bottom there, managing challenges. Our field has its own inherent issues, concerns, and challenges. And I want to make sure that when you leave a program with me, you have answers to your challenges, because life shouldn't be so hard. When you're focused on doing the work, you shouldn't have to be focused on dealing with the roadblocks that sometimes get put up. And then on the right-hand column, I won't read through all of these. You see them there on screen. The tools that you'll be getting, they're going to help you with all of these actions, from collaborating to engaging your learners, determining the best way to structure your projects. I love that we give you time in the program to be exposed to new technology tools and new design ideas. It's just a very rich learning experience. And I'm looking to advance my slide, and it's a little slow. As it's thinking, here it goes. I'll tell you about part 3. 8 weeks after we finish our time together, you would be invited to submit a work project. And this work project would show your design work. And there are 14 specific points that your project needs to demonstrate. They will not be a mystery to you because they're included directly in your materials. And during our 3 days together, we will go through them so many times so clearly you will know exactly what's expected of this project, because it is exactly the same things that you should expect of all of your projects for yourself after you complete the program. And so it is a set of best practices. And as I mentioned at the open of the call, you'll be getting feedback from me, and you will have a very thoroughly reviewed project. And a lot of people really, truly value that aspect of it. The elective that you choose is included in the core course program pricing. So it's not an additional expense. And ATD allows you to take any other program besides another master program. That would be a little peculiar. So any of the online courses, any of the face-to-face programs, you could choose. And that way you can supplement it with what matters most to you and what your needs are. So I mentioned earlier that I think a key deciding factor for many people is who they'll be working with. And so there I am smiling at you from the left side of the screen. And up at the top right, I mentioned I did earn the Certified Professional in Learning and Performance credential. Actually, I was one of the pilot pioneers, one of the first in the world to attain it, something that I hold pride in. And the comments that I shared with you earlier that are on the middle of the screen, Mike and Molly and Anne-Marie, Kieran, they were all participants in Master Instructional Designer with me. And these are things that they emailed to me following the curriculum. So I think that it says more than I can say about the value, so to speak. And down beneath that, I shared a couple of screenshots from ATD's site, td.org. It's content that has been published to the site that I authored. And these 2 excerpts happen to come from one of the 3 books that I've written, which are on the side there. Some of you may know the workshop series, the red book and the green book there, part of a larger series that ATD has published. It's a best-selling series, actually. And those are the 2 titles that I was invited to publish, or author rather. And then I've made some contributions to TD at work. And I share that with you so that you recognize that I am an active practitioner in the field. I think that makes a pretty significant distinction. All of ATD's facilitators are that way, but I can tell you that it's true of me. And the reason I think it matters is because I'm living the same challenges that other instructional designers are. I'm working under the same constraints that others are. And I think that that's an important aspect of who you learn with. So feel free to look me up on either ATD's site or on the internet in general. You'll find a little bit about me. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to bring up the last 2 slides. And the last 2 slides have to do with what makes you an master instructional designer. And it starts with knowledge and understanding just how it is that adults actually learn. And then building on that knowledge to create your skills to build effective learning curriculums, whether they're face-to-face, self-paced, or virtual instructor-led. All of the content of the course applies to all delivery mediums. And then lastly, having an attitude that's focused on performance. You're going into your work thinking about the learners in your courses, changing how they do their jobs, because that's what we're paid for. That's what we're hired to do. Deliver results, deliver performance on the part of the employees that go to our programs. And I would love very much to meet 16 of you in Amsterdam in October. And I say 16 of you because the course is limited, and that actually enhances the learning opportunity. It's not a ballroom full of people listening to a lecture. It's an intimate, interactive group. So our final point, our final slide, I shared with you that there was a real benefit of your investing this time, and you can see it right in the middle. And having joined our webinar today, it entitles you to a 15% discount off of the program. So if you are able to join us in Amsterdam in October, the dates of October, the dates on the summit here are the summit itself. The learning event is the 10th, 11th, and 12th. So if you're signing up for the summit, you'll get that discount, and here is the code to help you with that discount. And there is an email provided there for you if you have other questions specific to registering. But I wanted to ask Nina if there were any questions that she captured coming through that required an answer from us. And also, if you haven't already submitted your questions, to go ahead and do that. Nina?
Yes, hi, thank you so much for this, Kimberly. And thank you so much for everyone for being part of this webinar for the last now almost 40 minutes. So we did have some comments, we did have some questions. I've managed to pick up most of them as we were going on, as some of them were logistically related. There is one that I would pass it to you, Kimberly, and it's from Yasmin, who basically is asking, once she joins the master program on the ATD in Amsterdam, can she also pick up on any other free online programs as well in terms of additional learning materials that probably she can access? I assume this is the question that she's asking.
Yes, and Yasmin, I see that question. You are absolutely correct in your desire for that, and you can choose another online program from ATD as your elective. And I also see Sarah has a question related to planning for job transfer. So it's almost a course in and of itself, Sarah, but yes, I will address it. The way we address planning for job transfer starts with understanding the true workplace need. It starts in our assessment. And so if we know what we want to have happen, let's use safety as for example. If what we want to have happen is for people to be cognizant about and pick up packages safely so they don't injure their backs, if that's the action we want to see afterwards, we're going to design the course in such a way that there is practical application of that skill. There is an influence on learners' attitudes about why it's important to do that. We're going to share knowledge in an interactive manner with those participants to help them understand the downfall of doing it inappropriately, that it's not just their manager being difficult, it is actually ensuring their own safety and well-being. Because the only way we can plan for job transfer is to influence people's attitudes to do the job differently, enhance their knowledge of the reasons behind and the way how to do the job differently, and then develop the skill. So we have to hit on all three of those aspects, and we have to give them the tools to then support them on the job, because it may not always be quite as simple and straightforward as picking up a package properly. It may be following procedures and processes. It may be navigating software systems. It may be leading employees in difficult situations. And it's not always so easy as step 1, step 2, step 3. Sometimes there's a lot of subjective information going on. I'm looking at those other questions. Nina, are some of those questions you might choose to answer on fees, etc.?
Well, in terms of the fees, as Kimberly mentioned, the ATD and Informa are joining forces for the ATD European Summit in Amsterdam on the 8th and 9th of October. But after that, we've got the master programs that are running after the summit, and all prices are available at on the ATD European Summit website. We can follow up with that on the email, and as Kimberly said as well, you have 15% off from the programs. So this code will be available only for people who are part of this webinar today.
And I thanked Sarah in the chat panel here, but I just want to, over the phone, thank you as well here. I appreciate your saying that my response to your question shows that this course goes beyond the certificate course that you attended. And it does. I facilitate the certificate course as well. It's a fantastic program. This is a master level course. It goes to a deeper level. So thank you for that acknowledgement, Sarah. Do you remember who you learned with? I'm curious. Oh, Zishan, thank you. How is this program useful for a trainer or facilitator? Fabulous question. So as a facilitator, sometimes we get handed a course design that someone else put together. Maybe they were not quite a master instructional designer. Maybe they have pushed a lot of content at us with a lot of lecture. You'll learn strategies to quickly convert a lecture-based, content-heavy curriculum into an interactive session. So there are certain things I keep in my bag. Index cards are one of them. Red and green cardstock are another. There are others that I'll share with you. Stickers and dots and markers. Now, why are those things such powerful tools? Because I can take content that's heavy and take index cards and quickly transfer that content to the index cards and have the group work with the material. So instead of saying, here are appropriate actions and here are inappropriate actions for X, Y, and Z skill set, I can take cards that have all of those strategies or actions listed on them and ask small groups to sort them. So, put in one row the ones that you think are appropriate. Put in another row the ones you don't think are appropriate. By then having them work through that, I can look at their work, see where they're tracking well with the content, see where they have confusion, target my comments to their needs, and if they're very, very clear on it, we can maybe validate that they didn't just get there by guesswork. We can maybe move more quickly through it. But by the action of them physically touching the content and collaborating to move the items into different categories, engages more senses, creates more discussion, creates more user-generated examples. And so with all of those types of good things coming from it, the facilitator, that you would be, gets to sort of step back and watch the learning occur and serve as a coach, serve as a guide to the participants. And that is really when you hit your sweet spot as an instructor, when you can leverage what people already know and take them to the next few rungs on the ladder, take them up a few notches. They will remember you as an exceptional facilitator because you hit them right where they were and helped them grow. And that's really what's key. And Sarah, you had a wonderful facilitator with Karen. Thank you for sharing.
Yay. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for picking up all the incoming questions. I think we went through all of them now. I'm pretty sure that those who will be attending the conference in Amsterdam will have way more questions, and they would love to see and meet you in person and gain some insight from you directly. So I think this has been very, very good webinar. Thank you very much for your questions, for your participation. Kimberly as well, thank you so much for waking up in this early hour to do the webinar for us. It's been a great pleasure to have you. So just quickly to remind everyone, the presentation and the recording of this webinar will be available in the next 48 hours. You will receive an email with the wrap-up of this presentation and also with the discount codes for the master program and the summit in Amsterdam in October. Thank you so much again for everyone for joining us. I wish you a very pleasant day wherever you are, and keep your emails on, because we'll have more content coming from ATD and Informa in the next months, and we would like to keep you to be the first ones to know about it. So thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, and please feel free, guys, to reach out to me online.
Sure. Thank you, Kimberly. Bye, everyone.